Hi everyone, welcome to day 11 of Steph's Take live stream series where I feature concepts from 2 books through the lens of the accountability evangelist. This is my first ever live stream series. I'm filming it live in my Facebook group for ambitious accountability ambassadors. If you are a person who is passionate about personal accountability and service to others, I invite you to join the Ambicam group. Now on to our books. Today we are featuring How Full Is Your Bucket by Tom Rath and Donald Clifton, and The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. Starting with How Full Is Your Bucket. I want to reference back to the day we spoke about Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he mentioned the concept of the emotional bank account. How full is your bucket is basically that same concept, but just a little bit different of a metaphor. So the point of it is that you can fill someone's bucket with positivity and recognition, or you can empty it with negativity and criticism. I'm sure you have a preference, and other people do too. So why should we fill buckets other than just to make people feel better? Well, the book points out that people have better safety behaviors, more engagement, better performance, and higher satisfaction. So for an organization, that becomes a competitive advantage. Important thing to note is that every interaction matters and it's seldom neutral. What does that mean? If you think about your day and kind of rewind it and go through it, there are many, many, many thousands of interactions, and it's really difficult to say that it was kind of in the middle. They're usually either positive or negative. And there's a magic ratio that is in How Full Is Your Bucket of 5-to-1. So ideally, you have 5 positive interactions to 1, well, I don't want to call it negative, I'll call it constructive. And that 1 constructive interaction, by the way, Steph's Take, should be compassionate and respectful. So even though it's not positive in the terms of praise, it's still delivered in a manner that is welcome. So in that way, you actually kind of have a ratio of 6-to-0. So that's what I would prefer. So highly recommend that. Think about that as a leader, or really as any person who interacts with anyone else. When you're talking with people, interacting with them, you want to fill their bucket. How to do that? The best kind of bucket filling is recognition. Okay? And specifically, recognition is most appreciated and effective when it is individualized, specific, and deserved. Okay, let's start with individualized. First of all, I think one tip I would highly recommend is make sure you know what the person and how the person wants to be called. All right, if you're not sure how to pronounce their name, ask. If you're not sure if they like to go by a shortened version of their name, ask. There's no bigger red flag to me when I'm watching somebody interact where someone says, let's say the person's name is Anthony, and they like to be called Anthony, and somebody meets them and they say, hi, my name is Anthony, nice to meet you, and the person responds with, hey Tony, what's up? It's kind of a presumptuous thing to do, and people do it all the time, but it makes a difference because it kind of says maybe you didn't care enough to find out what's important to them. And that's the main message in filling a bucket, is finding out what's important to them. So when you're interacting with people at work or at home, find out what's important to them, what fills their bucket, and do more of that. How do you find out? Well, you can observe, you can learn about them, but the easiest way and the best way is to ask. So make sure you do that. Another point that the book makes is that positive emotions are not just kind of a woo-woo concept we do just to make ourselves feel better. They actually make a difference. Positive emotions are not trivial luxuries, but instead may be critical necessities for optimal functioning. Here's a couple things that are impacted by positive emotions. Positive emotions can fuel resilience and transform people. They can broaden our thinking, encouraging us to discover new lines of thought or action, and can break down racial barriers. Obviously, really, really important things. So we don't want to take these positive emotions lightly. Often we think in a global crisis, who am I? What can I do? I'm only one person. Well, that's something you can do because interactions matter. One-to-one interactions matter. That's how you can make a difference. All right, we're going to segue to our second book, The Happiness Advantage. And the main premise of the book is that the quote is, Happiness is the center around which success orbits, not the other way around, right? Which means that if you change your mind, you change your happiness, you change your performance. That might sound familiar because we've talked a lot about that in this series in terms of growth mindset. Another point is that happy people not only bounce back from setbacks, they bounce forward. So they experience what Shawn calls post-traumatic growth. So you take a situation that wasn't super favorable for you, you turn it into a learning experience, and then you're better for it. So how do you take advantage of this advantage? Well, one way is to narrow the focus. I'm going to read a somewhat long quote to you to make that point. One of the biggest drivers of success is the belief that our behavior matters, that we have control over our future. Yet when our stresses and workloads seem to mount faster than our ability to keep up, feelings of control are often the first things to go, especially when we try to tackle too much at once. If, however, we first concentrate our efforts on small, manageable goals, we regain the feeling of control so crucial to performance. By first limiting the scope of our efforts, then watching those efforts have the intended effect, we accumulate the resources, knowledge, and confidence to expand the circle, gradually conquering a larger and larger area. So that's pretty powerful, and it all starts with starting small. Okay? If you take on too much, you might get discouraged if you're not successful right away. Another point he makes is something similar to what we discussed in Switch, which was shape the path. Lower the activation energy for the habits you want to adopt and raise it for habits you want to avoid. So things like if you are trying to start a new habit to go running in the morning, putting your running shoes right by the door is way better than having them buried in your closet. All right, and finally, the concept I want to highlight from the book is social support. So Shawn Achor talks a lot about that in the book. So from my perspective, the main message is don't do it alone. Okay, we all need social support to achieve our goals, to live our life. And the type of support I believe we need is what I call vested support. Okay, that's the support where somebody knows you really well, they understand you, they know why you haven't achieved your goals, they know what's in your way, they know what makes you tick, and they are committed 100% to enabling your success. That's the type of support you need. It doesn't have to be a friend or a family member, but it could be, of course. There's nothing wrong with finding that in a counselor, a therapist, or a coach. In fact, I highly recommend that every single person has a coach, no matter their age. And it makes a huge difference. So I'll talk about that in a future discussion, but I just want to make the point. Don't do it alone, okay? There are no hero badges for figuring things out on your own, okay? Working hard is not the same thing as doing things the hard way. I highly recommend hard work. I do not recommend doing things the hard way. Get the epidural. Okay, I digress. All right, let me wrap up with a couple concepts just to pull the two books together from my perspective through my lens. So in accountability training, the main concept that I teach and have developed, as many of you have heard, is control versus influence. Earlier you heard me read a quote about control. So on the control side, I want to say, don't wait for others to fill your bucket. Okay, and at the same time, do not dip into others' buckets in order to fill yours, meaning don't go after your own happiness at the expense of others. Okay, that's how you take control of the situation. And now let's move to influence. Okay, so happiness is attractive and contagious. If you're happy because your bucket is full, people are going to be falling all over you to put more in your bucket. Okay, and you might be like, well, gee, then what happens? My bucket's going to overflow. Of course it will. But it won't matter because you didn't need that, because your happiness came from within. Right? And that's the main message, is that that's where it comes from. If you don't love yourself, you cannot love generously and give generously to others, which is the main point of accountability. Which brings us to my conclusion, which is take accountability for your own well-being. That is your greatest happiness advantage. I'll see you next time.